Welcome to my review for AEW All Out 2022. Built up as the rematch between Jon Moxley and CM Punk as was signed last Wednesday. Now, when comparing the buzz around this show compared to last year, it's nowhere even close. Last year we had the debut of Punk, we had the Bryan Danielson rumors, and then on the actual show we saw Bryan debut along with Ruby Soho and a surprise appearance by Adam Cole and also Minoru Suzuki. This year's show, this was a very weird show. There was something off about this show, and I'm not really entirely sure what it was. It wasn't a bad show necessarily, but something about the show didn't feel right. I think a lot of it might have to do with the match order, because I think as I'm watching the show, I feel like certain matches could have been put in different parts of the show to make the show flow better. I thought the flow of the show was a bit off. Not to mention that one of the major criticisms of this show that I think is important is that two of the major feuds going into this show, two of the more personal feuds going into this, did not get enough time whatsoever and also felt a bit underwhelming. And to me, that is something that's going to be talked about, obviously, as we go through the next few weeks. I think one of the big things about these pay-per-views is that AEW's pay-per-views are always pretty good. Their TV shows, it depends on the week, but their pay-per-views are usually always good. This show in particular did have a couple of nice surprises, especially with the return of MJF. Although, if I'm being critical here, it could have been done a little bit more creative and a little bit better. It just totally depends. But we'll get to that. I'm going to talk all about that here today. There were some good matches. I do think that the main event match between CM Punk and Jon Moxley was the best match of the night. It's the one I enjoyed the most. But there were a couple of sleeper hits, so we're going to talk about it here today. First of all, like I said, the match order was a little bit strange for me, but I would have done it a little bit differently. So the pre-show match, or the pre-show, the 0 hour, had 4 matches. Sammy Guevara and Ty Mello against Ortiz and Ruby Soho. That was okay. Didn't get that much time. Hook versus Angelo Parker for the FTW title. That was pretty much as good as it's going to get. You want to keep Hook strong here. Pac and Kip Sabian was good. Your first really athletic match of the night. Then we had Eddie Kingston and Tomohiro Ishii. And I thought that this match should have been on the main show. I feel like this match, whenever you bring in somebody from New Japan, especially somebody who's been a never openweight champion, and they have a match like this, I think it should be more fitting to actually make the main show. But like I said, I think one of the problems with this pay-per-view is that I feel like they booked too many matches. I think they booked way too many matches. I think the matches either didn't get enough time or it was poorly. I think he gave like certain matches more time than they should have gotten, and some matches not enough time. And again, it's not a big criticism. It's not like the show sucked or anything, but there were some letdowns. I still feel like of the weekend, I think WWE's Clash of the Castle is probably a bit of a better show because, hell, that Sheamus Walter match in the main event were absolutely stellar. But this show had some good matches too. So let me go ahead and get to it. So the Casino Ladder match featured it was Claudio, Wheeler Yuta, Penta El Cero Miedo, Rey Fenix, Rush, Andrade, Dante Martin, and a mystery Joker's card, which wound up being a man wearing a mask. Now, this was executed a bit strange because what happened was they had these masked men come out and lay everybody else in the match out, and then another masked man climbed up and took the poker key, and then after that, we saw another person come out from the back wearing a mask, like a white mask. This really reminded me of like the Black Scorpion angle, but the Black Scorpion angle, except that instead of it being a week-to-week thing, they rushed it all into one show. So that person, climbs up, Stokely hands him the poker chip, so he ends up being the next guy. Now, obviously the big talk about who this was MJF, and I feel like, in my opinion, this was a very underwhelming way to bring him back. And we're going to talk about that when we get to the main event, but I thought it was a bit underwhelming. It was cool. It got a big pop. It's good to see MJF again, don't get me wrong. But it was, to me, it could have been done better. When they first revealed this mystery masked man, what I thought they were going to do is they were going to take him and then kind of build up the next few weeks with a mystery box. Like, who is this mystery man? Like, who is it? And so every week we're supposed to be guessing about who it is. And they're going to get clues. Then it gets revealed, in a future episode of Dynamite. That's not what they did here. They gave it all away at the end, and I feel like it didn't have to be like this because MJF is a sly, cunning character. He could have been playing mind games with this masked man thing for quite some time. So to me, the execution, although it did get a big pop, and I'm glad to see MJF back, I think could have been done better. But again, more on that when I get to the main event. The Elite versus Adam Page and the Dark Order. Okay, I like this match. I think it went on way too early in the show. Seeing Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks go on second, granted they've done that before, but I think that the fact that it's a brand new championship, I was expecting this match to go as the co-main event, like right before the Punk Moxley match. That's not what we got. Again, weird match order. Maybe they wanted to get it over with. I don't know. But the match was fine for what it was. The finish, had Hangman Page missing the clothesline, then getting caught. And every time that Omega and Page were in the ring across from each other, the crowd was electric. So I think they could still get another Omega Page match on pay-per-view or even on a big show, maybe at Stadium Showdown or whatever. They can get that out of the way at some point in the future. So Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks become the first AEW Trios champions. Very predictable, but also expected. They're probably going to end up feuding with Adam Cole and Red Dragon when they come back, whenever that is. There are some injuries there. Jade, Cargill, and Athena, they were off. Something was off about this match. Jade Cargill came out dressed like She-Hulk in green, which is quite ironic considering that she is kind of green. And this match kind of showed it. They were a bit off in some of their moves. Their timing was off. Not saying that, I don't like either one of them. Obviously, I love Ember Moon, but the match it didn't connect with me. It only got 4 minutes and 20 seconds, and at this point, what do you do with Athena now? It's another win for Jade Cargill. So whoever ends up beating her, it'll be a big deal, and I feel like that title might even be, in some ways, that title might be more relevant than even the AEW Women's title. We'll get to that later on. Wardlow and FTR against Jay Lethal and the Motor City Machine Guns. Good match, not a great match. I expected more from the Motor City Machine Guns. I've been a big fan of theirs, and I want to see them and FTR go at it one-on-one. But again, something seemed off about this match. Maybe this should have been a better opener. It was fine for what it was. After the match ended, Samoa Joe came out after basically the heels were beating up the baby faces. And then I believe it was Dax Harwood's daughter. Yeah, she came out, the one that had been fighting, she had been talking about her in promos and whatnot. And then she ends up breaking I think she broke a pencil on Sanjay Dutt's face. So that was an okay moment. Again, underwhelming if you ask me. Now, speaking of underwhelming, Powerhouse Hobbs and Ricky Starks, 5-minute match. I have been looking forward to this feud for a long time. Ricky Starks as a babyface, I think, works. It just didn't do anything for me. Powerhouse Hobbs wins with a clean pinfall, 1, 2, 3. I don't know where they're going with this. I don't know where they're going with it. I know that out of the multiple matches on this show, this match and the Christian Jungle Boy match, both of which had the most heat behind it as far as personal rivalries go, and they both were very underwhelming. And in my opinion, I think that, I think both Hobbs and Starks have a future. Don't get me wrong. But I feel like this match could have probably been better served if they had more time on a different show. Swerve in Our Glory against the Acclaimed. I was kind of surprised that the Acclaimed were this cheered. Now, I've been on the Acclaimed. I've loved the Acclaimed for a long time as far as promos go. In ring, they're fine. And the match was interesting because we have Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland who are darlings to a lot of this crowd. But much like what would happen with the main event, the crowd picked one entity to win, and it was the Acclaimed. They did not win, but the match was good for what it was. It got 22 minutes and 30 seconds. Now, I will say I would have personally preferred if they shaved time off of this match and given it to another match. My opinion only. Because, the Acclaimed, I don't think they were built up properly for this tag match. I don't think they had enough momentum. I think had they pushed the Acclaimed maybe a bit sooner, a bit further, it wouldn't have felt so shoehorned. This show felt like it was done, like booked at the last minute. It really did feel this way. And I feel like 2022 has really exposed Tony Khan's booking flaws. And I'm going to talk a lot more about this on the next episode of the KLB. I'm going to leave a link in the description, My wrestling podcast, the Fabulous Lucha Brothers Wrestling Show, we go in depth on all this. And me and Brandon Draven talk about this, and we're going to for sure discuss this because it needs to be discussed. Because to me, the Acclaimed, again, I like the idea, but there's just, the show itself felt very rushed. It felt like they didn't really properly build things up, with the exception of the matches I already mentioned, especially Jungle Boy and Christian, but that story's not over. Toni Storm, Dr. Britt Baker, Jamie Hayter, and Hikaru Shida, 4-way for the AEW Women's title. This was fine as well. Maybe got a bit too much time, but I can't complain because a lot of folks think the women don't get enough time. So here they got almost 15 minutes. Toni Storm won. Now, Toni Storm was originally booked to beat Thunder Rosa, but Thunder Rosa was supposedly injured. There's a lot of rumors right now going on that Thunder Rosa either lost her smile or she's being punished or something. I don't really know. Those are all just rumors. As far as I know, she's actually hurt, but there are a lot of rumors about this. Obviously, this is for the women's interim title, which means that Thunder Rosa will come back at some point to unify the titles, like what they did with Punk. But Toni Storm was originally booked to win. I do feel like Thunder Rosa's title reign was a bit of a wash. I liked the feud with Britt Baker. I liked when she beat Britt Baker in Texas. That was a great moment for her and her career. But after that, it just sort of went downhill and she felt very directionless. I think the issue with AEW is that they have way too many contracted talent, way too many people, and don't have enough time to push all of them. And they've had this problem for a while. And I think that, unfortunately, when you have a big roster and not enough TV time, you're going to have some talents either not get enough TV time or maybe not get enough wins. And not every AEW fan, in fact, the vast minority of them, they don't watch AEW Dark or Dark Elevation. So all we have is Dynamite and Rampage. And sometimes you just don't have enough time to build momentum. And that's something they have to really think about. Christian and Jungle Boy, this pissed off a lot of people. They've been building this matchup now for, 3 months? They've actually been building it up longer because the whole thing started with a battle royal that happened last year. And what happened here is that pretty much Luchasaurus came out and chokeslammed Jungle Boy off the stage. Because the whole thing is about this match is that we have been wondering whose side Luchasaurus was on because they almost hinted like he was going to be with Christian, then he's with Jungle Boy. And so here we found out. Jungle Boy's all beat up, gets put in the ring. Christian hits him with the unprettier 1, 2, 3, 20 seconds. This match really was looked forward to by a lot of people, including me. And granted, the storyline will continue. And it's going to ultimately end with Jungle Boy getting his hand raised and Christian putting him over. We all know that. This was probably a big shocker and a big letdown for a lot of people because it was a match that was built up for a very long time and one of the few matches on this show that really had a good build-up. Like, it really had a direction, unlike a lot of other matches. And I feel like this one, some folks are going to be pissed off at the length of this match. Chris Jericho and Bryan Danielson, great match. Lionheart, Chris Jericho, we had everything here. The reversals, the brawling, Bryan busted out the counter mutilation. If you remember, folks, this was the first main event of the very first NXT show back in 2010. Daniel Bryan, Chris Jericho, and Jericho was the World Heavyweight Champion. And they had a great match back then, much shorter. This one got more time. And I was wondering where they were going to go with this because either guy could lose and get his heat back because they're both super popular guys, huge careers, they've been all over the world. Very similar talents, very respectable. They both respect each other, in the real life, I mean. Great match, though. I really like this match. Bryan was about to win. What happens is Jericho low blows him behind the referee's back with his, heel. Then he puts him in the Judas effect, knocks him out, gets the 1, 2, 3. So now, apparently, the storyline with Daniel Garcia and Jericho will continue because apparently Daniel Garcia is going to be wrestling Wheeler Yuta on the next Dynamite, so we'll see where that goes. Then we have the co-main event, Darby Allin, Sting, and Miro versus the House of Black. Again, decent match. I actually like this match. There was a lot of cool spots here. Miro is freaking awesome. The House of Black is a gimmick. Their entrance must be seen live. If you've never been to an AEW show live, I highly would advise you to go to one because if the House of Black is booked, because they always give you good entrances. The smoke and mirrors, literally. But the match was fine. The match was fine. Darby Allin, I worry about his health and safety. I worry he may end up in a wheelchair someday, I'm being honest with you. The dude does some really crazy stuff here. And I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed it. I thought that of all the trios matches, the Elite one was probably the best one, but this one was right up there. This one was pretty close to being just as good. Very fun match. Darby is a bumping machine. Sting busts out the Scorpion Deathlock, and he even did the Mist. On Aleister Black or Malachi Black, and then Darby hits the Last Supper Cradle and wins. It looks like this feud is going to continue because it wasn't really a definitive victory. So then we have our main event, CM Punk, Jon Moxley. This was the best match of the night in my opinion because it told the best story. CM Punk, hometown guy, crowd was behind him. Moxley had some of the crowd, but it was about 70-30 Punk. Yes, the Moxley fans were around. They were cheering. They were going nuts for this whole match. We had some brawling on the outside. There wasn't too much garbage stuff on this show. It was pretty much a more of a wrestling-focused show. But here they brawled everywhere. There was the early part of the match. Punk hits Moxley with a series of knees and does the GTS, but Mox kicks out. And then for a long time, Mox gets the advantage and gets a lot of near falls with not just the DDT, but also choking Punk and, beating him up. Punk did bust himself open. He was bleeding. The story they told was that Punk had a bad leg and was bleeding and had to fight against All Outs to win, and that was a good story being told. And I really like how he hits the GTS. The great finish, I thought. He hits Mox with the GTS. Mox bounces back off the ropes and lands on top of Punk, like on top of his shoulders. And then Punk has to use the last bit of strength to hit him with another GTS for the 3 count. So even though Mox lost the match, he still looked very, very strong. And now Mox is the first 2-time AEW World Champion. Punk is the second 2-time AEW World Champion. Then after the win, the lights go out and they play this tape recording, right? It's like a voicemail recording from Tony Khan saying, the fans, they miss you. You could already tell what's going to happen. I'm going to put you in the Casino Battle Royal. We won't tell anybody. Basically, the angle this was supposed to be is it was supposed to be Tony Khan talking to MJF, and I knew it was MJF. It was a recording of Tony Khan talking to MJF, telling him, hey, please come back. I'll pay you whatever you want. I'll give you a new contract. And which, by the way, this is all a work, folks. This is all a work. All of this. Some of you guys were fooled by this. This was a work. Granted, at first, it was not a work. MJF really did want to get paid more. There really was an issue between them. It quickly became a work, and Tony kept MJF out until All Out. No pun intended. So they show the guy from the beginning of the show with the mask on, and then he turns around and he puts the scarf, the MJF scarf. They play MJF's music. He walks out and he signals that he wants the title. So obviously the next pay-per-view, Full Gear, will be CM Punk versus MJF number 3, this time for the World Heavyweight title of AEW. So MJF got a huge pop, massive pop. However, there was a couple of issues here. Now, there's 2 things I want to criticize. Number 1, I felt like this was a mistake because they could have had the Mystery Masked Man be an ongoing angle on television that would have had people wondering, okay, who is this guy? And even if you would have guessed MJF, they could have had some clues and had it be like a weekly thing. We're trying to figure out, where this is going. Who is next? That's one thing they could have done. The next thing they could have done is they could have had it to where MJF, they do more quasi-worked shoot stuff. Have MJF come in through the crowd, have some teases. No, all that happened was MJF cuts the promo on Tony and then walks out, and then he's gone for 3 months, and then all of a sudden Tony calls him and says, please come back. So it's almost like Tony, in a way, bent over for MJF, kind of bent over and said, okay, like, you know, please come back. So he kind of made it so that Tony Khan, like, kind of cucked to him, which I don't know if that's supposed to be a good or a bad thing. I have no idea how the fans are going to take it. I personally, I thought that was a cool touch to play the voicemail. I did think that was a cool touch, right? I thought it was. But I think this entire storyline, I think it could have been so much better. I think one of the problems with AEW, and this has been an issue all year, is that they're kind of too afraid to do really long-term serialized storytelling. They don't do storylines to where it's like week to week to week, like, you know, one phase to the next, to the next, to the next. You know, and they did do that with Jungle Boy and Christian. They did do it. Don't get me wrong. They've done it before. Same thing with the Elite feud with Hangman Page and Kenny Omega and all that. That was like a week-to-week thing. That was really well done. But I feel like a lot of times it's just booked matches, and a lot of times there's not that much thought put into it, whereas I feel like if they can have like a long-term storyline that kind of continues one after another, I think that probably will work out better. I mean, we'll see where it goes, but ultimately, even though I love seeing MJF back, even though I'm glad he's a top heel again, it could have been done so much better. I thought the execution was cool, but it was also wasted potential. To me, this whole pay-per-view cycle is wasted potential because it could have been so much better. So much better. However, as I said, MJF versus Punk at Full Gear is probably going to be the main event of that show. On top of that, there were some little things in the show that bugged me, like they had a lot of times there was blatant interference and rules being broken in front of the referees, and they didn't do anything. Now, I'm not Jim Cornette. Obviously, he's bothered by those things more than me, but it happened a bit too much on this show. And like I said, the match order was really weird. Overall, I felt like last year's All Out was probably a better show. 2 years ago, probably not. But last year's All Out was a better show. This main event was great, though. And overall, it was not a terrible show, but there are some little things here and there that AEW has to work on. A lot of it has to do with them having too big of a roster and not enough TV time. So I'm going to do a separate video about that, on how to improve AEW, because there's so much talent in that company and not enough TV time, whereas WWE has so much freaking TV time, and they, for a while, didn't have enough talents. Now they kind of have enough, but I'll go more into that in a different video. So, thumbs in the middle show, if you ask me. Not my favorite episode or edition of All Out, but I look forward to the next pay-per-view, Full Gear, and we'll see where it goes, because this was, I'm intrigued at least, and I want to be there when MJF wins the title. And I might go to that show live in Newark. We'll see. Anyways, with that being said, that's it for my review. What did you think about AEW All Out 2022? We'll talk very soon. Take care.